Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Good evening.
Hello. I see folks rolling in. Haley, I'll let you let me know when we have a quorum. I know. Okay, the house is still on the floor, and I would guess that might go on for a little longer. So.
Senator Lockman, this is James Deshane. I was just on the Zoom for the House. They're on the last bill right now. They have the last bill, and then they're going to do your Senate concurrent resolution honoring the Del Mar police officer. Then they should be finished. So
Okay,
it
very
should not
nice.
go much longer.
Okay. Okay, folks, we're very close to quorum. Just give us a couple minutes and we should be all good to go. So just enjoy this moment of quiet reflection before we get into the agenda. Right on, go Eagles. Okay, sounds like we are good to go. So we can make the slideshow full screen. I think we are all set. Okay. All right, everyone. Welcome back to, feels like it's been a while. It's only been a couple months since our last Reading Consortium for Educational Equity full body meeting. And our work groups have continued to meet and busily advance our work as we all have done in many ways. So our etiquette, just to start the meetings, to remind you, there it is. We just ask that everyone stay on mute so that we can hear the featured speaker. You can use the chat function for questions and comments, in the background of our primary dialogue. And then also just want to make sure everybody knows that the meeting is being recorded, and we may post it in part or in whole for public information purposes. So as this is a public meeting, and we like to keep everyone informed of our work so that they can be fully engaged with it. Oh, and there it is right there. For a roll call, we're not going to do a person-by-person roll call. We'll just ask that you show that you are here and you are present, and just type your name into the chat so we can mark you as present for this evening's meeting. So I'll just give folks a couple of minutes for that. Do it myself as well. And Haley will be able to see that we are all here, looking good. Good, great. Okay, so since we do have a quorum, we are going to go ahead and approve our minutes from our prior meeting, which you should have received in your email documents for preparation for this meeting. So this time I would just look for the sound of a motion to approve those minutes. And a second.
This is Tika Hartsock. I move to approve them.
Thank you. Tika makes a motion to approve the minutes. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, Matt Dunn seconded. All in favor, we'll just do a voice vote. Just say aye or give a thumbs up.
Aye.
Aye.
Great. Anyone opposed to the approval of the minutes? Speak up now. Okay. I think we're good, Haley. Great. Okay. So we're going to go right into the work group updates, although we're going to move around a little bit. We're going to stay nimble with our agenda. I know that the House is wrapping up, and Representative Chicocha will be giving us the update on funding and governance. So we're going to have to put that at the back of our updates. So we will move past that one really quickly and come back to it, and go straight to putting social determinants work group front and center. So Jeff Menzer, Ray Jones Avery, you guys are welcome to take the floor and give us an update on what you've been working on since our last full body meeting.
Oh, great. Thanks, Senator Lockman. I'll take over here and then Ray can chime in. Since the last meeting, we've met once. We did meet on March 8th with 3 primary focuses that were stated here on the slide. We continued to talk about leveraging our personal and professional networks to carry the story of the consortium and the recommended funding opportunities to support the work. We did begin to develop an advocacy toolkit for our work group members to be able to have a slide deck that they could interchange and use as they went about to the various groups that they were presenting to or people they were speaking with. And then we did have a pretty engaging interactive data portal session with Dr. Adrian Peoples from the Department of Education. He's the Education Associate of Data Management and Governance. He really, he wowed the group with the the data that is out there, and then the ability with which the public can actually interact with the data management governance group to seek different data sets for use for community access. That was the March 8th meeting. Our next meeting is May 10th, and we're going to continue in the space of stressing advocacy for the work, telling the story of the consortium, as well as educating ourselves more deeply on the various projects we've endeavored on from July to now. Specifically going to be focusing on a school-based wellness center presentation from Nemours and a child developmental screening presentation from the Department of Education.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And Ray, if you had anything you wanted to add to that, now's a great time to do it, or we will see if we have any questions in the room. Okay. I'll just ask if anyone has a particular question, you can just raise your hand. If you don't know how to raise your hand, you can call out, and we will be happy to take any feedback from consortium members at this time. All right, looks like, okay. All right, well, looks like we don't have any questions on that. So good job, Jeff. You explained it. It sounds like you guys are indeed, fleshing out some of those initial recommendations, which is good to hear. And if there are no questions, and if you have a question later, you can always feel free to bring it back. We will move on to our settlement work group and invite Aaron Bass and Chuck Longfellow to give us an update on where they are. And I know you all as consortium members should have received some additional attachments related to what this work group has been doing as well.
Thank you. Chuck Longfellow here, CFO, Christina School District, and co-chair of the settlement work group. This work group was established in response to the education funding lawsuit settlement. So just to go over our scope and goals again, we want to be a watchdog, one of the several watchdogs on the settlement. We want to help the consortium respond appropriately to settlement implementation. We want to be a subject matter on the settlement for the consortium and create recommendations. We want to offer guidance and influence decisions and challenge the state and General Assembly to not just meet the terms of the settlement, but to exceed and accelerate them wherever possible and connect the settlement to systemic and equitable change. Thank you. Next slide, please. So recently, since our last meeting, we've had discussions on the Opportunity Fund and greater systemic reforms. We've had some speakers coming in from the other work groups, educators and social determinants work groups. We took a look at the new DOE equity statement in the state regulations for major capital improvement projects. And we also had stakeholder discussions and talked about the ombudsperson program, which are both things that are ongoing with the settlement and things that are being implemented as we speak. Next slide, please. So as far as the equity statement, earlier this year, the Department of Education did put forward a revision to the Major Capital Improvement Program regulation to require an equity statement, which was a requirement that was in the settlement. So here is the language that was added to the regulation, the equity statement here. And so this was discussed and analyzed with our committee's lens, and we do have some recommendations to put forward as a committee. Next slide, please. So the work group did take a look at this and says, yes, it does meet the minimum requirement of the settlement. However, in order to enhance its ability to promote educational equity, which the consortium is all about, we do have some recommendations that we would like the consortium to endorse. And one is that that there's language to further modify this administrative code, or to have the Department of Education consider modifying this administrative code so that the equity statement is posted publicly. Also, CN applications, certificate of necessity applications are posted publicly, including these equity statements, and that a summary of CN applications approved by the department are posted publicly. Also, that the department issues specific guidance on what CN equity statements must include. You know, I don't want to read the whole thing to you here, but I almost feel like I need to. Yeah, the department would also establish in the regulation the minimum elements required in the equity statement to ensure that it's meaningful. Just a one-sentence statement or a two-sentence statement would not promote equity, which is the goal of our work group and this consortium. Also, a process would be established for internal review of the statement outside of just the DOE Finance Department. Each district would be required to create a baseline assessment of their district buildings, which I believe most do anyway now. And certificates of necessity equity statements have to include how improvements are connected to this plan. Also, the committee recommended that the equity statement must be part of the board approval for the certificate of necessity, and CNs are required to be approved by boards anyway. So this is the recommendation of the work group. I don't know what's on I forget what's on the next slide. Is that, oh, questions and comments, yes. And then I think after this, we'll be asking if this is something that the consortium endorses or wants to put forward to maybe see if we could get a motion on this or to modify it and move on it.
Okay. Great. Thank you, Chuck. That's very solid stuff. And we can go back to that slide if people need to look at it, if they have questions related to it. Maybe we can roll back to it real quick, Haley, just so folks know what they're asking about. Obviously, this is part of the minimum requirements of the settlement, and the work group, I think, has done a wonderful job of helping make sure that it rises to the occasion of what it is intended to accomplish. So if anyone has any questions about what the subcommittee is asking for, now is a great time to raise those. I'm not seeing any hands, or let me see, look in the chat. Okay. I'm not hearing any objections or questions or comments. So there is, let's see. Okay. I don't think we have any questions for you, Chuck, it looks like.
This is Tika Hartak. I motion to accept the recommendations of the settlement work group.
Let me check. Let me have Haley and Kelly do a check really quick to make sure that we do have a quorum, because I think we may have overcounted our membership and we may have to hold off the motion until we have that quorum. Haley and Kelly, could one of you give us our current count?
I counted 14, which is more than quorum. But
That does not include ex officio members?
does not include ex officio.
Oh, okay, great. Well, then I think we are in good shape. All right, thank you for checking. I want to make sure we did not approve something without hitting that threshold. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. And I think we would need a second for that.
Second.
Okay, great. Haley, can we do a full roll call on this one?
Yes, I'm gonna have to exit my screen and just pull up everyone's name. So just bear with me real quick.
That is fine.
Thank you. Okay, oops, sorry. There we go. 1 second. Okay. Aaron Bass,
Yes.
Alfreda Butcher, Senator Lopez,
Yes.
Thank you. Danielle Woods,
On your board of
Yes.
directors and be able to help you to that.
Darrell Green, Jeff Menzer,
Yes.
Eugene Young, James DeShane,
Yes.
Joe Jones, Catherine Bradley, Margie Lopez Waite,
Yes.
Maria Matos,
Yes.
Link Kohler, Matt Den,
Yes.
Mike Przicki, Representatives Mike Smith, Representative Namdi Chukwocha,
Yes.
Noel Picara, Ray Jones Avery, Dan Shelton,
Yes.
Stephanie Ingram, Ted Blunt, Tika Hartsock,
Yes.
Tizzy Lockman,
Yes.
Henry Smith. Okay, so I think we're good on the yays if all 14 that were here said yes.
Okay, good job. All right, the motion passes. We've endorsed the equity statement recommendations from the settlement working group. Good job, guys. And I think you have more to present upon.
Thank you. Yes, we do. I'd like to turn it over to my co-chair, Aaron Bass, CEO, Eastside Charter School.
Thank you so much, Chuck. And thank you all for approving the equity statement. We want to make sure that we are adding and revising and making sure that we're making recommendations that are in the best interest of our state. And so I think that does that. The Ombudsperson program, which you also have information about, from the settlement, it states the program shall focus on non-legal interventions with school districts to resolve disputes or complaints concerning disparate discipline, inequitable access to school programs, or otherwise different or unfair treatment of students. The ombudsperson will be available to act as non-lawyer advocates for students and their families in any proceeding conducted by schools or local, state, or federal education agencies. And so this is pulled directly from the settlement between DOE and the governor's office, as well as DEO and NAACP, and is acted on with ACLU. We've been using the language from the settlement to drive most of our work. And as we know that this ombudsperson group is going to have a very pivotal role in making sure that students are able to get the education they need, as well as get the supports they need, and the schools get the necessary training and correction when needed to build a better community. You can do the next slide. How our settlement committee got together, we discussed the Ombudsperson program, and we even drafted a framework for the Ombudsperson program, and you have that tonight, all the members here. We also drafted weights for the RFP. And just to be very clear, the settlement committee is very clear that it is up to DOE in this case, along with the governor's office and also with OMB, to create and draft the RFP, and then have other conversations with those involved in the lawsuit. We also asked that a member of the Reading Consortium be on the RFP committee for the Ombudsperson program. You can do the next slide actually too. Oh, sorry, go back. I jumped ahead. So on April 10th, Representative Chukwocha and myself met with members of OMB, staff from Governor Carney's office, as well as DOE, just to discuss a draft of the framework. This was before we had even brought it even here tonight. And the plan we had thought would be that we could share this with the Reading Consortium, go through the same motions that we had discussed with the equity statement. But we were surprised when an RFP came out on 4/15 and didn't have notice of that. We're having conversation to make sure there's better communication between the Reading Consortium and the settlement committee, as well as members that are working on the settlement so we can make sure we're making proper recommendations and also that we can work on our timelines, be more proactive. I want to get as much information out there as possible ahead of time. Tonight, you also received the full RFP for the Ombudsperson program. And so that was, while we're not having discussion tonight about the RFP or asking for approval, it's because it's already out there. But we want to make sure that you have that, are aware of it, and also know the timeline's also been pushed back later into May. So the dates and the initial one that you have are actually pushed back. I do know there's other members here from DOE and from the governor's office who might want to share some more information later on. And even I know there's a question that I just received about what is in that bill. And so there's bilingual support in that bill. It might be best if there are questions that we also have somebody from either DOE or from Governor Carney's office to answer some of those as well. So we'll take questions.
I left myself on mute. All right. So do any consortium members have any questions for Aaron or Chuck on their engagement with the RFP development process? I'm not seeing any hands. Or did you affirmatively, Aaron, want to invite? Oh, never mind. I spoke too soon. Hi, Maria. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm great. Welcome. The floor is yours.
Well, is there a requirement for bilingual support in the proposal?
In the proposal that came out from DOE,
Yes.
I would love to invite a representative from DOE or from the governor's office to answer that question.
I believe, let me check our participant list. I know we have, the secretary always does join us, but we may have others here as well.
We have Secretary Bunting, and I see John Sheehan as well.
Okay. Secretary Bunting, I will, yield to you if you would like to speak on it or defer to one of your counterparts.
We have with us this evening, I believe, our Associate Secretary in charge of operations who was involved with the RFP, and also John Sheehan from the governor's office. So I will defer to the two of them. They are prepared to answer your questions.
Great. Thank you, Secretary. So I do see we have Associate Secretaries Kim Klein, as well as John Sheehan, and one or both of you is welcome to, I don't know if you heard the specific question, but we can certainly restate it, to join us to.
Sure, I'm here, Senator.
Hi, John. How are you?
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to jump in and didn't unmute myself. Maria, I'm not sure. I was trying to pull up the RFP, but we can certainly dig it up after this meeting and send you a response. I couldn't pull it up in time to answer your question.
So John, I can answer that specific question with the caveat that we cannot go deep into having conversation about an active procurement, but the document is public and there is not any specific requirement for bilingual services. That is not to say that any vendors who bid on the proposal would be precluded from proposing those services. It was intentionally left fairly open-ended so that providers can come in with their built-out programs that would best meet the needs of our students.
I just can't understand how the Department of Education can put out a bid for proposal without running it through this committee, knowing how long we've been working to ensure that all children get the same equity services that the children get. I'm really disappointed that my question cannot be answered because it's already been put out there. So in other words, you're saying there's no need for it because it's not requested. If by the grace of God, if it happens, it happens. If it doesn't, oh well. Is that what I'm hearing?
No, that's definitely not the intended answer. So as I said, the RFP was developed to be pretty broad and allow opportunity for potential bidders to respond to the need for the statewide program and to address the needs of our students. So not preclude us as we go through the process into contract negotiations from including that requirement, but it was not specifically called out in the RFP.
I'm disappointed.
Thank you, Maria. Did you have any further questions?
No.
Let's see, okay.
Is it possible? I think I'd love to learn more about how we can be made aware of RFPs with the state and also how to access what is happening with this RFP. I don't know if somebody from either John Sheen or Kim Klein want to speak to that as well.
Sure, if that's all right. Yeah, I'll jump in and start and kick it to Kim, and I'll try and be as concise as possible. And I also saw Tika put the link to the RFP in the chat, so thanks so much, Tika, for that. So Aaron did a really good job of sort of sharing the scope of the RFP, and this is to begin in the coming school year. And it's as you mentioned, part of the settlement agreement, and one of the provisions of that is that we were required to meet and confer with the plaintiffs about this, and so we did that. And we also received a request from a few members of the consortium to have a meeting. And so, as Aaron mentioned, we had a really good meeting, I thought, with Aaron and Representative Chukwuocha. We of course confirmed at the beginning that they weren't gonna be bidding on it, because we obviously couldn't have a meeting with folks who were bidding. So a few of us on the state side, I think, had a good meeting with them, reviewed their feedback, and made revisions to the final scope of work. So you should be able to hopefully see those. And then additionally, as Aaron mentioned, they made a suggestion about including a consortium member on the RFP committee. And so we have asked someone to consider participating on the committee. It's a little bit different, and Kim will talk about the kind of procurement process, but sometimes groups have like a formal designee to a body that goes and then reports back publicly. Because this is a legal procurement process, that's not how this works. But we did ask someone who has a history of working on education equity issues and also brings the perspective of a consortium member. And then additionally, we have decided to extend the question and answer period by 15 days, just to make sure that, and the application period, to make sure that we have robust participation. And so Kim can kind of provide the kind of in the weeds answer to your question, Aaron, about the process. But I also I want to emphasize what Kim said, that since it's an active solicitation, we can't really take like specific questions on the RFP, just because that would sort of risk the process. And the goal, as I think everyone shares, is getting this up and running for the next school year to start doing what Maria was saying, serving families and helping right away. And so I'll turn it over to Kim, and Kim, maybe you can give just some kind of details on the RFP process in general.
Yeah, sure thing. Happy to. So the ombudsperson request for proposals was released, as you know, on April 15th. It is an active public solicitation and can be found on OMB Government Support Services website. I think the link has been shared in the chat. We encourage interested parties to review the RFP. Because it's an active RFP, as we've said, we're really unable to discuss the specifics of the particular project. Any questions related to the solicitation should follow the process outlined in the RFP documentation. The timeline has been updated to allow for additional time for questions. So that revised timeline is questions will be due on May 13th, and responses to those questions will be posted publicly on May 20th. The deadline for receipt of proposals is June 2nd, and we intend to make notification of award in July. So just wanted to share a little background on RFPs, because we know that has kind of been at the heart of some of the discussions recently. So RFPs are the procurement tool utilized by the state to ensure an open and fair public advertisement and competition for services or goods required by state agencies. The process is managed generally either by OMB or by individual state agencies, depending on if the initiative is statewide or agency specific. 29 Delaware Code Chapter 69 provides the legal basis for public procurement activities. And Erin, to answer kind of specifically your question about how people would know about the RFP, Government Support Services as a unit of OMB has a webpage dedicated to supporting potential vendors and providers. And it provides information on how to do business with the state, how to register for future RFPs with the state. And anyone who might be interested in that, that is found at mymarketplace.delaware.gov. So to ensure a fair and appropriate process, conversations regarding any active RFPs are not permissible with any state employee or member of the review panel. And what that leads to is vendors found to be in violation of that may be disqualified from qualification. And so I think that really kind of gets at some of the challenges here. You know, the state, to make sure that we have a fair and appropriate process.
We're all familiar with that feeling, Karen. It's okay.
So sorry. My dog does that when people pull into the driveway. And it just happens. Timely, of course. So Erin, I really do think that's part of the challenge here, is that the consortium is obviously very interested in this RFP, but the state also wants to make sure that we have a fair and appropriate process and don't engage in any conversations that would raise questions to the process and then further delay our ability to implement on the program. So a couple of things I do want to identify in terms of vendor responsibility, because this is really important as vendors think about and respond to our RFPs. So again, responsible for seeking out those opportunities can certainly register with the state on the website. The GSS website allows vendors to go in and identify areas of particular interest to them and then register, so that at any time the state offers a bid solicitation, they get electronic notification of that opportunity. So in terms of vendors' responsibilities, again, they're responsible for identifying opportunities for which they want to do business with the state. They're responsible for reading and fully responding to the RFP. There are exclusions built into any RFP that if a vendor fails to complete all of the mandatory forms or respond to all the components, that they may be removed from the process. They're responsible for submitting all questions through the formal process and within the advertised timeline, and then responsible for submitting a complete proposal prior to the timeline, both date and time, for receipt of proposals. And one important note is that the vendor, the bidder, is responsible for delivery within that date and time frame. And so even if they use like UPS or FedEx and they're promised a certain date and time, if that doesn't happen, it's ultimately the vendor's responsibility. So I know I just said a lot. Hopefully that answers some of the questions. If there are any specific questions about an RFP process in general, I'd be happy to take those questions or answer them. If there are any questions specific to this RFP, I would encourage you to submit your questions through the formal process. And then we'll make sure that they are publicly available and then publicly answered as well.
Thank you, Kim. And I think for us, just to echo the same sentiments of Maria Matos, there are some very passionate people in the Writing Consortium who are in this work because we want to make sure that we're able to work with leaders at all different levels of the state of Delaware. And so we do not want to interrupt or have any thought that there's some impropriety taking place, but more so, we'd love to have as much input just to share our beliefs and our views, because it directly impacts my life directly and that of my own child who's a student of Wilmington, my son. So I do think we'd love to be able to be proactive with you and share information. And if you give us timelines, we can be more effective at just sharing input, gathering feedback from other stakeholders to help in the process that you all are doing along with the settlement and other actions. And I also have a question just about the publicity of this, because I do know that Delaware has a wealth of leaders who could be really impactful in this ombudsperson's group. And so is there any more publicity outside of this website for people to actually learn about this, or people who might not be on this website to become an ombudsperson and sit and put an application in?
Yeah, that's a great question, Aaron. So in order to ensure that we are not giving the appearance of impropriety or favoritism to any party over another, we really stuck with what is the typical RFP process. So all advertisement of all state RFPs is done through the GSS website. And we wanted to stay true to that course with this initiative as well. Again, just to avoid, we really are making sure that this process follows the law, but then also the process that all of our statewide RFPs follow, and really trying to prevent against any challenges or appearance of impropriety, anything that would cause us delays in moving this forward. And so that's really been our goal. And so what you see us doing is taking all of the steps and precautions that we would take in any RFP.
Well, since we're in a public meeting today, I encourage everybody who is in the Zoom, spread the word, because we do want to make sure that the right people and organizations are at the table for the ombudsperson positions, and also that our children and our schools are a better place because of this. So for those of you on this Zoom tonight, definitely information. We've also sent out the approved RFP from DOE, and then we'll also be making sure that we are getting as much information in advance from DOE, from OMB, from the governor's office, so we can provide input. And so we won't have future meetings where we're sharing disappointment because there are pieces that weren't considered because there are stakeholders who could have helped a lot in this process and in future processes. That is it from the settlement committee.
Well, thank you very much, Aaron. I know that you all put a lot of work into that, and I appreciate Kim being here to help explain the process, and John Sheehan as well from the governor's office. This is all very important work to all of us, and we want to be on the same page and make sure that we are truly advancing equity for our kids. So I appreciate being able to have the conversation here tonight about it. And obviously, if there's any further questions, we'll get together and talk those through. Thank you. I think we again had some quorum questions. So we may need to, Haley and Kelly, did you want to redo the motion from prior during the settlement report? Is that correct?
Yes, please. I'm very sorry. I miscounted. I always count Chuck because he's speaking, but he's not a full consortium member. So I think very highly of you, Chuck, but we all do. But I'm very sorry I miscounted. So we did not have quorum when we did the original vote for the equity statement. So we're going to have to redo that. I apologize.
Okay.
Do I want to do a really quick recap, Chuck? I'm sorry, just for those who joined us within the past few minutes who might have missed it.
It doesn't have to be, I filled in a couple people by text, but you could definitely do a high level overview of what we were voting on.
Certainly. So yeah, thanks for bringing this slide back up. The settlement committee did review the equity statement that was included in the regulation of 401. And it does meet the minimum requirement of the settlement. It does that. However, in order to have it increase and support equity, the settlement work group does have several recommendations, and they are on this screen right here. These are 4 recommendations that are designed to increase transparency, and through transparency, increase the opportunity for us to make equitable decisions as a state.
Okay, so I think we had a motion and a second, so we'll be looking for those again so that we can vote again.
Make a motion to accept the recommendations of the settlement work group. This is Tika Hartzog.
Thank you, Tika. Looking for a second.
Second, this is Danielle Woods.
Awesome. Thank you, Danielle. And we'll do a quick roll call on that.
Yep, gotta exit my screen again real quick. I will read the names again. Aaron Bass,
Yes.
Alfreda Butcher, Senator Lopez,
Yes.
thank you. Danielle Woods,
Yes.
Darrell Green, Jeff Menzer,
Yes.
Eugene Young, James DeShane,
Yes.
Joe Jones,
Yes.
Catherine Bradley, Margie Lopez Waite, Maria Matos,
Yes.
Link Kohler, Matt Den,
Yes.
Mike Perzicki, Mike Smith,
Yes.
Namdi Chupocha,
Yes.
Noel Picara,
Yes.
Ray Jones Avery,
Yes.
Dan Shelton,
Yes.
Stephanie Ingram, Ted Blunt, Tika Hartsock,
Yes.
Tizzy Lockman,
Yep. Yes.
Henry Smith. Okay, now let me count them all.
We have 15.
Thank you, Kelly.
And we'll just quickly, because we would like to do things properly here at the Reading Consortium, we will redo the minutes as well, but we won't do a full roll call. We'll just do a voice vote since we've just done our count. So if I could get a motion on the minutes and a second, that would be great.
I move to approve the minutes. This is
Thanks,
Tika.
Tika.
I second, this is Danielle.
Thank you, Danielle. And all in favor, thumbs up, say aye, whatever you prefer.
Aye.
Awesome. And anyone opposed to approving our February minutes? Okay. All right, I think we got those two things done. I don't believe we have other motions pending today. Just as an FYI, not as an endorsement for anyone to drop off, because we like our quorum, we like our strong attendance, and we have some great stuff coming up. It's still in our agenda. We have one more committee report. We will touch briefly on some updates for the legislation that we endorsed at our prior meeting. And then we actually have an outside guest who's going to do a brief presentation on some national trends and best practices in unfinished learning. So do hang on. I think we're doing all right for time, but want to make sure that we all get to share and all that good stuff. So we will now go back to the funding and governance work group update and have Representative Chupocha walk us through where they are in their process at this time. Representative.
Thank you, Senator Lockman. Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. Our update, first of all, I'd just like to thank all of the staff for Reading for all of their hard work and commitment to all of the work we've been doing, and our meetings and the work that's going on behind the scene has been very fruitful, and it has really helped us to just maintain the momentum, even though it's been a while and COVID has been very just painstakingly difficult on our work, but we've continued to move forward. And I again, just thank the staff for their commitment to helping us stay focused on our efforts and overall charge for our committee. The update for the referendum reform, the last draft, so we had a piece of draft legislation. We reviewed that in our committee We received feedback, and some of that feedback was included in an amendment. So then there was a final draft. That final draft of the legislation has been presented to the chiefs, and we're just waiting on that final feedback from that group and other educational stakeholders. And then once we have it and we feel that it's agreeable, it is our intent to push it forward and to have it included and heard in the education committee this session. So again, we're just waiting on that final feedback from these groups. Some of the changes that were presented in the amendment to the original draft dealt with alignment or trying to have a trigger point that recognize the property reassessment work that's going on throughout the state and the different counties, and how that would impact the referendum reform bill. So we were very happy about where we ended up, and we feel it's a good piece of legislation that really addresses the overall intent of referendum reform. We feel that there are mechanisms and structures in place that tries to recognize where districts are right now in the continuum of the referendum process as this is implemented. So we're looking forward to having a very strong bill, and can't wait till once we get that final okay for these groups to bring it back to the full body so that everyone's familiar with the piece of legislation.
Thank you, Representative. And I believe, are we going, is Simone Philpotts going to present the next portion of the?
Yes.
Great. Wonderful.
Good evening, consortium members. My name is Simone Philpotts. I'm a PhD candidate in the Biden School, and I serve as one of the IPA support staff for the Funding and Governance Work Group. I'm before you today to tell you a bit about my dissertation research and let you know how you can help. My dissertation proposal is entitled Civic Capacity for Education Funding Reform in Delaware. And civic capacity is a community's ability to get diverse participation of active citizens to work together to solve collective problems such as education reform. Since Brown versus Board of Education, even before then, we've been trying to improve the educational outcomes for Black and Brown children and have seen little to no improvement. In some instances, the progress or the lack thereof has been intentional. And in some instances, you actually have people actively working for improvement, yet continuously reaching a dead end. So my research uses the concept of civic capacity to explore why that may be. I'm looking specifically at the education reform groups such as Reading, WEIC, Vision Coalition of Delaware, the Wilmington Center of Education Equity, formerly West, to name a few, that have been actively involved in education funding reform in the past 10 years. I'm reviewing documents such as final reports and minutes, as well as conducting surveys and interviews to draw conclusions on Delaware's ability to finally pass education funding reform. The elements of civic capacity that I'm exploring are inclusive community leadership, which looks at the diversity of the leaders in reform efforts, collaborative institutions, which basically measures a reform's effort to participate and promote public-private partnerships, diverse and inclusive citizen participation, which looks at the diversity of regular people involved in the movement, and finally, shared vision and values, which looks at the differences, if any, between what the leaders of the movement believe are the problems and solutions versus what the beneficiaries of the policy change believe. Most of you have already received the survey. Thank you to those of you who have completed it thus far. I have close to 200 responses, but if you haven't, I am asking that you take 10 minutes out of your night to complete the survey. The survey closes May 15th. And I'm also asking for some help getting the survey in front of principals and teachers. Finally, once I get some results in, I will be reaching out to some of you like Secretary Bunting, Secretary Geisenberger, Senator Sturgeon or Rep. Williams, superintendents, the district CFOs, Mary Nash, John Sheehan, Jay Street, Vivi Coker, Maria Matos, Rachel's Avery, to name a few, for 30 minutes of your time to delve deeper into the analysis of my results and my analysis of the documents for the discussion section of my dissertation. At the end of it all, I plan to come back to you all to present my findings to the full consortium or just invite you to my dissertation defense this summer. That completes my ask. I'm going to place the link to the survey in the chat.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Simone, for your work with Reading and your support of the mission goals and process that we've committed to as a consortium. So hopefully we can return that favor and will enrich and advance our work. Does anyone have any questions, either for Representative Chikwocha on his report or for Ms. Philpotts on hers? We'll look to see if we see any hands raising. Everyone's pretty quiet today. It's been that kind of day for sure. All right, great. Well, excellent updates. I think that concludes our work group updates for this evening. And with that, we can move into very brief legislative updates, just so that you all know where things stand on some of the legislation that we chose to actively support beyond our own recommendations this year. And that was Senate Bill 56, the codification of opportunity funding, House Bill 86, the unit to add K-3 basic special education support, and House Bill 100, which adds units for mental health services to our elementary schools. And just for your enlightenment, and if you would like to pursue further advocacy on these bills that we're supporting, Senate Bill 56, the opportunity funding bill, did pass the Senate and went in and out of the House Education Committee. So it's next headed to the House floor to be led by Representative Williams and Representative Chikwocha. So if you're looking to advocate for that, you would want to be reaching out to our House members. And House Bill 86 is currently in House Appropriations Committee. So your advocacy on that one could be pointed in that direction as it moves towards a floor vote in the House. And likewise, on House Bill 100 is sort of the same status. So it's working through its paces, particularly as a bill with a significant fiscal note attached to it, is being considered in House Appropriations in order to make it to the ready list and the floor. And one, I think, significant update to House Bill 100 that I'd like to speak to, and perhaps invite Representative Chikwocha to speak to it. We did have, I think, a pretty robust conversation in which our support for that bill was couched in February, and then we saw some advocacy coming, particularly from the Wilmington Center for Education, Equity, and Public Policy. And so the House sponsor, the prime sponsor of that bill, is Representative Valerie Longhurst. And she introduced an amendment which would essentially ensure and encourage a more equitable distribution of those units, adding in some flexibility for some of them in order that we might be able to make sure that there's a priority of placements for our highest needs students in our highest needs schools, and some flexibility around units of a certain type throughout the district. So very, very positive, very successul. I think that our discussion led to that adjustment that the sponsor welcomed wholeheartedly, and we were very appreciative of that. So Representative Chikwocha, I don't know if you wanted to speak to House Bill 100 at all, or anyone else in that matter. I can't see the full list, but that's where things stand with those particular legislative efforts at this time.
Senator Lockman, this is Rick Geisenberger. How are you? I did want to mention one other bill that's kind of important. I don't think it's particularly controversial, but I think it's important in terms of ensuring equity in education funding. And that's a bill, House Bill 170, which got out of House administration this week, which actually gives the counties the money they need to do reassessment.
Oh, wonderful.
Right now, under state law, they're not permitted to use realty transfer tax revenue for the purposes of reassessment. And most of the 3 counties' surplus funds were raised through real estate transfer taxes. So in order to use their surpluses to pay for reassessment, we need this bill. And I assume it will sail through, but it is an important bill to make sure that the counties have the financial resources to pay for the reassessment that they've now each agreed to do. So.
Thank you, Secretary Geisberger, for bringing that up. I was aware of that one and hadn't thought to bring it up, but as we know, we've all been supportive, I think, of reassessment as a critical component to school, to the improvements that we seek. And so House Bill 170, we will, look it up. I think we can probably get that out in our email distribution to you all to take a look at that bill as well, to think about advocating for support of that, but definitely a lot of familiar names on that sponsorship list. So thanks for the reminder. Anyone have anything else that they want to raise our awareness of? Yes, go ahead.
I apologize. I'm trying to find the bill number. I thought it was Senate Bill 94, but it's not. But there is a bill that was introduced, I believe yesterday or the day before in the Senate, around educator recruitment, and in particular allowing teachers who minority teachers to have a better access to the current high needs school tuition reimbursement.
Correct. Senate Bill 99.
Sorry, but
oh, sorry, Senate Bill 99. I was just giving you the bill number. Yes. I think
that fits well into what we were doing in our educator work group, and I think that's a great bill for us to put on the radar.
Absolutely. So that's being led by Senator Pinckney, and it takes the current high needs educator student loan, forgiveness or grant program, and expands it so that educators who fall into racial and ethnic groups that are not in the majority are able to access that program just according to that status alone, if they don't fall into one of the other categories. So definitely a bill that we think could enhance the diversity of our educator workforce, which is something that has been a very clear and present priority. So thank you for raising that one as well. 2 great examples of legislation that supports the goals that we've been highlighting over these past months. Thank you, Alexis, for putting those both in there as well. Great. Anybody else? Okay. All right. So that's our legislative status update. And next slide. Oh, okay. We wanted to not miss the opportunity of having a meeting to just remind everyone that while we do support other pieces of legislation that are happening that certainly advance our intentions as a consortium, we don't want to forget the hard work that we've done as a consortium to come up with our own interim recommendations, most of which are budget asks, and make sure that we remember that we need to continue to advocate very hard to ensure that these asks end up in the upcoming budget. And so, as we know, we have these 2 large focused areas where the dozen or so asks fall underneath. The focused comprehensive help to support students who are going to be attending some of our most challenged schools and are at the most risk for poor outcomes, and then laying the foundation for the more structural and the broader reforms that we so frequently talk about, that are focused on equity and improved outcomes. So next slide. These were the specific requests. There are there are 8 of them. I'm not going to read them. We've talked about them pretty extensively. They add up to about $20 million overall in asks. So hopefully you remember all of those. Focused on a range of supports that we think can move the needle sooner rather than later while we're working on those more structural long-term reforms. Next slide. So just as a reminder to members, if you would like to ensure that we are successful in all of our hard work as a consortium and advocate for these reforms, the next phase, of course, is to reach out to particularly the chairs of the Joint Finance Committee to let them know that you, as a member of the consortium, obviously have endorsed this package, but can certainly remind them that you do support it and would like to see the follow through that they be funded. And then you can also reach out to all Joint Finance Committee members, myself included, to let us know what you would like to see on this front. And the other thing that you can do, if you haven't already, is to offer a video testimonial on your position of support. And that's something that we've been sharing on social media. It helps us spread the word to other advocates about what we are attempting to do and the impact that we think that it will have. So I think Haley was going to just play that one for those of you who haven't seen what we did on our press conference day to discuss the recommendations. And
yeah, I'm going to stop sharing. Yep, there we go.
Okay. Don't forget to share the little, or click the little audio button.
Express my gratitude to everybody who's dedicated so much time to this effort over the last year and a half, and most especially the leadership, Namdi, Tizzy, you, Matt, those who have really worked hard to keep this thing going. I think in the end, this will prove to be one of the most effective education initiatives that we've seen in many decades in the state of Delaware. How the work ends is still to be determined, of course, but I'm confident we're laying a solid foundation for progress into the future. You know, I have feelings about education. I think that over time we've continued to try to patch a system which I think is fundamentally flawed, and I'd like to see us be more systemic in the way we change things. I wrote a note to myself to be bold, and then Ray, of course, reminded us to be brave, and I think that's great advice. Jay, you always manage to touch the issues at their essence. When Jay talked about violence in the city, it hurt me to be reminded again that we just have far too much violence, and it affects young people. Yesterday we had a 13-year-old shot in the city. And of the guns recovered last year, 20% of them were from juveniles. This is the world that we live in. And in my view, what the reason for this is we have very weak institutions. The institutions these kids need to be anchors in their lives are just entirely not strong enough to sustain them. What is the one institution that we have control over that can affect kids' aspirations, can affect their self-image, affect the sense of affirmation, are our schools. And so we have to turn to our schools maybe to do more than they expect to have to do. But all I can say is that I know we're on the right track. I appreciate the great work. I want to congratulate our leadership for the great work they're doing. I encourage everybody to keep working for fairness and equity and excellence. Excellence, by the way, which can be defined as well by the kind of citizens we turn out as by test scores, as much as we have to be concerned with test scores. For my part, I want to continue to be a voice for the educational vision for our city, and a vision that I hope you all understand, I hope means a new high school someday. So again, my congratulations and gratitude on a job well done. Thank you.
Okay, so that's just an example of one of the ways Jason Burke with our team can help you to get that done. You don't necessarily have to pat us on the back as much as Mayor Przicki did, but really just want a message of touching on the recommendations, and if you believe that they will be impactful, why, and just your general philosophy on advancing the work. So just wanted to put that out there. You can email Jason at this email address if you would be interested in recording a testimonial. And thank you for those who have done so. I saw Dawn Alexander from our social determinants work group put one out, I think this past week, and it looked fantastic. So just a little plug for how we can help contribute to getting over the finish line so that all of our hard work on the interim recommendations can be fruitful. I think that's it on that point. So for getting through all of our business, we have a treat today. We have certainly done a lot of interfacing with the Education Trust over the past years, and they are really a national leader on policy issues around equity in K-12 education. And so we wanted to give consortium members an opportunity to hear from them some of their analytical work in part of the equity conversation that's very relevant right now as we begin to emerge from the pandemic and think about how do we make up for what's been lost. And so we'd just like to open the floor and welcome our guests from the Education Trust. We have Kayla Patrick here and would love to hear from Kayla. Is she here?
I'm
hi,
here.
Kayla.
Hi, everyone.
There you
So
are.
happy. Thank you for inviting me. I'm going to share my screen so I can, whoops, get this going.
Let's see, make sure you have do you have access?
I do have access.
Okay, good.
It's just being a little, uh-oh. Well, if it'll let me. I guess I'll start talking about what the project is while this is figuring itself out. We embarked on a project with MDRC about a year or so ago to really dig through the literature to really understand more about what interventions or strategies we could use to catch students up after so many months of being disconnected from school buildings. Okay. Now let's see if it'll work. Can you guys see that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, great. And so I'm going to talk about some of the strategies that we identified. And we're calling this unfinished learning, which may be a new term to some of you all. We've made a conscious decision not to use words like learning loss or learning gaps because we don't think it accurately portrays what students are actually experiencing, and it's a deficit-based term, right? All students can learn with the right supports, whether that be opportunities, materials, assessments. When we provide students with equitable opportunities, they can catch up, right? And some students may just need a refresher. They may have been disconnected from school due to internet troubles or whatsoever. So really want to highlight that unfinished learning is the material that they probably would have mastered had they been getting that high quality education, but because many of them didn't have access to those typical opportunities, they may have fallen behind. And so I'm going to talk about some of the strategies that we can use to catch them up. So I know we're talking a lot about legislation and policy, but I like to ground us in actual students. So I want you to imagine 8-year-old Maya. Maya lives with her mom, who was a nurse, her grandmother, her 12-year-old brother, and her 3-year-old sister. So there's a few of them in the house that she's concerned about. She shared a computer with her brother for the first 4 months of the pandemic. Her school opted for 3 hours of Zoom class a day, and it was sometimes tricky to get onto that Zoom class because her neighborhood had shaky or unstable internet connection, so sometimes she just couldn't log on to class. Maya, as a person, is a natural caregiver. She always wants to help her mom and her siblings in any way that she can. And one thing that's really important that I'll get to at the end is Maya hasn't had contact with any school staff outside of her typical Zoom class. So Maya, like many other students, is experiencing unfinished learning because she had that shortened school day, because sometimes she couldn't log on to school. She just hasn't made as many gains as she typically would have during a school year. So I'm going to talk about some of the strategies we could use to support students like Maya, which there are many across the country. So the first strategy that MDRC and EdTrust came up with through the literature is targeted intensive tutoring, which is sometimes known as high dosage tutoring. So what this means is that one tutor is working with a student over an extended period of time. That's all year, every school day in an ideal setting. And they're working on academic skills. So it's not just a homework help club. They're typically working on skills, a skill building curriculum to help kids to catch up. The key equity considerations here that are really important, especially for students like Maya who have experienced some disrupted instruction, is that those tutors have to be well trained, and I'll talk about what that means. It has to be a single tutor with less than 4 students at a time, so small groups with the tutor so the tutor can really work on those core skills with students. It must be a skill building curriculum. Like I said, that homework help isn't really helpful. There should be a curriculum that is closely aligned to what students like Maya would have already been learning in the school day, right? So if she's learning long division and during the school day, the tutor should be helping her catch up in places where she may not have mastered that long division skill, right? And that's what it really means to be targeted to students' academic needs. We're really stressing the importance of using assessments or diagnostics to really support the needs of students and really understand where they may be falling behind. And so in these briefs that we put out, and I don't know if Marissa put it in the chat yet, but there is a chart in the brief that we really hope folks like you all could navigate the literature quickly without having to read all the studies that we read, right? And so what we've done is created a chart to show you where the more effective strategies are and what is maybe less effective, but some folks have used in the past. And so what we know to be most effective is that when the tutors are certified teachers, meaning that they have already gotten a lot of that training that really makes them a strong tutor, right? Those are the most effective folks to really help students catch up. In an ideal setting, we would put one tutor with one student. That is not feasible in most places, whether that be a teacher shortage or you just don't have the people to do it. So the most efficient thing, according to the literature, is placing two students with one tutor. But sometimes that's also not feasible. So we are recommending a 1-to-4 ratio to be the largest. Like I said, it's really important. It's a skill building curriculum that builds on what students are already learning, right? We want to accelerate learning, not remediate, not send kids back. We want to just build on what they already are learning in the school day. It's really critical that those tutors, no matter if they're paraprofessionals or peers, whoever they are, they must get pre-service and ongoing training. And also it's really important that they get that observations every once in a while. Someone's popping in to see how things are going, making sure that things are going for both the student and the tutor. It's also really important that this tutoring is done in a time that really works for kids and their families, right? It's most efficient when it's during the school day. So sometimes we'll see schools do a double blocking situation where they have one math block that is a typical classroom setting, but then the second math block will be designated for something like tutoring. It's also important that this happens on a consistent basis all year for the whole school year. And the research does show that it's more effective for our youngest learners, and that's just because their brains are ready to soak up more. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's not effective for older kids. We see programs like SAGE that are doing really well for tutoring in high school settings. The second strategy is expanded learning time, which folks are talking about a lot right now. This could be summer school, after school, or any way that you expand the typical learning day. So the key equity considerations here are very similar. It must be aligned to the in-school curriculum. It has to be targeted to the students' needs. The well-trained educators are popping up again throughout the research here. And small class sizes are important. I know in the typical traditional school day, class size research is really shaky. It's less shaky and when we're talking about ELT programs. It's really critical when we're talking about expanding learning time to really understand that just tacking on more bad school time isn't effective, right? We really need to make sure that kids have access during the traditional school day to high quality instruction and a rigorous curriculum for an after school program or a summer school program to work, right? So we need to make sure that everything is moving smoothly and equitably in order for that additional time to really be effective. The chart here looks very similar to the tutoring chart. The curriculum has to be aligned and high quality. The pre-service and ongoing training is very similar throughout the research here. We did find that it is more effective during the school day, right? So when that would be a double block, like I talked about earlier, double math blocks, double English blocks, that would be an expanded learning time during the school day. One of the tricky things about ELT programs is the attendance. Sometimes when it's after school or summer school, we have harder time getting kids to be engaged and want to show up, and families have other things planned for their kids. And so it's really important that we think about how to get that engagement up. And it really is a tricky thing that we see throughout the literature. So when it's during the school day or right after school, it's really more effective. There is a sweet spot in terms of how much time we should be using, right? We don't want to just extend so much time that kids are just doing way too much school. So we recommend about 45 to 100 hours in additional school time broken up over the entire school year. That class size should be about 10 to 15, and certified teachers, while not always feasible, are the most effective here as well. I want to tell you all a cautionary tale though about expanded learning time program. It's not always equitable or high quality, and we really need to make sure we're not sacrificing those things when we're doing these programs in a quick way after this long pandemic, right? And so in 2012, Florida passed legislation that required double blocks of reading. And a study of that found that there's relatively small outcomes in many places. And in those places, the students were not placed with a certified teacher, and the class sizes were way too big, much larger than we're recommending here. And so that's why they attributed the smaller outcomes in those schools. So it's really important that we're thinking about those equity guardrails when we're enacting some of these things. And the final thing, which is a little bit different, EdTrust is trying to take a holistic approach to catching students up, right? So it's really important that relationship building is a part of these strategies, and the literature and the research really supports that, right? Strong relationships and connections to school not only bring kids back into school buildings and make them feel welcome in school buildings, but help them to learn and feel comfortable in their learning settings. And so it's really critical that we are thinking about building strong relationships. Part of the reason why so many kids are disconnected from school now is because they didn't have those strong relationships before, right? Think about students like Maya, who hasn't had any contact with any of her teachers outside of her Zoom class, right? That is a good sign that maybe someone isn't reaching out to her family to see how she's doing, and they probably are lacking that strong relationship that would really benefit students like Maya. So here are some of the things that the research shows is really helpful in terms of building developmental relationships between students and educators, right? So that means they have to express care, challenge growth, provide support, share power, which is really something that is not always enacted through our discipline policies and the way that we have constructed school, and expand possibilities. These are just key ways that we should just probably be treating each other, right? But we should be mindful of how we treat our students as well, so they feel connected to school. And the research support this. So in programs that are really focused on not only academics, but building strong relationships, the outcomes are larger. Students are gaining more and they're catching up quicker, right? And so adults are much more effective when they're certified teachers, only because they're already in the classroom, they're already spending time with students, right? And so they already have that opportunity to start building on that relationship, to build and connect with students during the classroom time. But that doesn't mean that a school nurse or someone else in the building can't also be a person to build strong relationships with students. It's really important to build in time into the school day to build those relationships, right? So either advisory groups or something like that, where educators can meet with a small group of students and really get to understand who they are and their interests, and really develop a strong and close bond with them is really critical here. And that pre-service and ongoing training is another thing that's really important. And so the final thing that I'll end with is just a reminder. I'm sure you all know the American Rescue Plan allocated a lot of money to states and districts to really implement some of these interventions that I just talked about. So that these 3 interventions really do count as some of the things that schools, districts can use that federal money for to really help students to catch up with an equity lens, right, and support their social emotional learning. So everything that is in the federal law requirement meets these strategies that we've highlighted here. And I will stop there for questions.
Thank you, Kayla. Love those resources, especially about trust building. I really, really love that one. Does anyone have any questions? I'll look for hands, or you can just feel free to speak up. I know that just 2 days ago, we had a major announcement from our governor and Secretary of Education that on accelerated learning, the plan to address unfinished learning here in Delaware. So I'm going to pop that in the chat, make sure everyone has seen that. If you haven't already heard about the tenets of that plan, it certainly aligns with this conversation. And I'll also put that in there for you folks at Education Trust to take a look and let us know what you think as well. But I don't see any hands or beyond Tika's questions in the chat, any further questions there. But
Dr. Shelton has a comment.
Go ahead, Dr. Shelton. Sorry, I didn't see your hand.
That's okay. I just wanted to ask this, and maybe it's a dumb question. Is this presentation going to be sent to us or those links? Can we get them sort of in a document maybe so that we can quickly and easily reference them, as opposed, because this chat's going to disappear in a minute.
That is true.
Yeah, Marissa can round that up and send it to you.
Thank you so much. They look very helpful. I got through 2 of them so far.
Excellent.
So yeah. I'll just add the 3 briefs were included in the Writing Consortium newsletter, but I can go around and send them as well. So Marissa doesn't have to, send it to one person. I think I can send them to everyone. And then this will be posted on YouTube. So when the video is up, I can send that around as well.
Great.
I see Maria has her hand up.
Here I
Maria, go ahead.
Yeah, my question is, I know that the up with this. My question is, how are we going to monitor that the districts or the schools are using effective tools such as this? How are we going to monitor the use of that extra money that's coming from the Rescue American Act or whatever you call it? Is there something in place that the Department of Education can say to a district, well, those are not certified teachers, that is not targeted, that is does not expanded learning. So how do we ensure that targeted intensive tutoring is happening, and it's happening in a way that has been demonstrated that works here?
That's a really great question. So districts should have a responsibility to report something to states, and states will have the responsibility to report exactly what intervention they used and who got that intervention to the Federal Department of Education. That is in the legislation. The Department of Education has not yet said what that exactly looks like. I think there is an application floating around online, which I can dig up for you all, that kind of gets at what they're going to be looking for, but what they're going to be looking for is what interventions districts and schools use with the funding, and who got those interventions. What we're encouraging states to do is to issue additional guidance and requirements to districts to really report that data, right? We want to make sure that our most historically underserved students are really getting the best that we have to offer, meaning that we want to know who got what intervention. Did they have the opportunity to get that tutoring with a certified teacher, or did they get a high quality intervention? I think that's really important data that states should be collecting from schools and districts.
But Kata, don't you think that we should get that as a plan before spending the money? Because after you spend the money and I'm not saying that the districts are going to do this, but you know, with the history that we have in the education of poor children, one tends to question whether it will happen or not. So wouldn't it be better for the Department of Education to insist on a plan before they spend the money and approve that plan to ensure that there are targeted interventions with the caveats that you put down?
Yeah, I think there's something like 60,000 districts in this country. So I think that's probably way too much for the Federal Department of Education. But I think that would have been ideal, right? What they did was they got the money out as fast as possible. And I think many of those dollars have already left the Federal Department of Education. So usually requiring data reporting is a deterrent from doing things that you probably shouldn't be doing. So they're trying to do it on the back end, but I think you're probably right. It would have been a better idea to have required some kind of plan, which is usually how they do grant funding typically.
What about the states? Can the states mandate the districts to provide a pre-approved plan to ensure that target intensive tutoring happens? I know that the federal government wanted to put the money out there, and that's a good thing. But now that the districts, I mean, they have the school's almost over, but they have the summer, and then they have next year. So what are the districts doing? And is the Department of Education going to give it a star or a go ahead or a thumbs up?
Yeah, I think in a state like Delaware, that's definitely something that's feasible. I believe that the district should have already gotten their first round of dollars. So I think we're already in that stage of what are you doing with that money? But I think that is definitely something that the state can and should consider in terms of issuing guidance and requirements.
So, Senator, maybe that is something, I don't know, another committee for this group?
To monitor the expenditures?
Yeah, I don't know. Just thinking.
No, I mean, I agree. I think that's something that's come up a lot since the pandemic started, you know, as resources have been flowing, you know, we've certainly wanted to understand how they're flowing, why, and what impact that's having. And we don't currently have a specific work group that's focused on that. But would love to know if I hear you, and it would be interesting to know if there's other consortium members who think that we should be leaning in more to that. I know, I'm not sure if the secretary is on with us at the moment, but we have had some conversations with her about how, you know, did you just unmute? Sorry, Secretary.
I am here.
Yep, there you are. Hi.
Oh, Maria, they do have to turn in plans to us before they get the a part of their money. So interestingly, they do have to report out on their specific plans for subgroup use. Our low income students, our minority students. So there is a very, as Kayla was saying, there's a very intense plan. And Kayla, I felt quite affirmed by your presentation, because it really mirrors exactly the accelerated learning plan that the governor sent publicized. We did a public press release about 2 days ago, and it was very, as I said, it was affirming to hear you point out the things right down to the acceleration piece, so that the relationships and the intense tutoring are all part of our plan. We are very excited about what's going to happen in Delaware with our students, and we put that out for all students in the state, and then districts can adopt or take the offer for parts or pieces of our menu. But we wanted to provide an option for many students and many districts to fit the needs for that specific district. I think that Dan Shelton can also speak to that from the perspective of the chiefs and the menu and the options and what they might be doing to supplement or to complement what is being offered by the state. So Dan, if you want to say anything to add to it, but we will ask for those plans.
And also those plans, I believe, are going to be, my understanding is we're going to be required to publish them on our website. So they won't just be a plan that goes between DOE and the district, but we're going to be publishing them as part of the requirement for getting the money from the state, or I think it's soon after they have to be published. As far as the menu goes, I thought the same thing, Dr. Bunning, as the presentation was going on, that there was a lot of stuff there that mimics the stuff that you guys have been preparing for us. And I think that the idea, it's not even just this year and next year, right? We have till 2024. So we're looking at both short and long range solutions, and combining some of these different strategies is going to be critical if we're going to see success. And I think also critical is that it's not a one size fits all, right? We need to make sure that we're identifying the specific areas of focus based on the student need. And another thing we've been talking about amongst the county superintendents, not just the individual need, but the time we have left, right? So there's a real strong push. We got to get the 11th graders, right? We only have them for a really short period of time, where we'll have a lot more time to catch up our first and our second graders. So it's also part of the issue is it's not just the level of potential need to accelerate learning, but how long we have to do that.
Caleb, we're actually hoping to accelerate learning so that children can be addressing grade level material next year with a lot of extra supports, and those extra supports can be financed through our ESSER 1, ESSER 2, and ESSER 3 plans. So we're looking short-term and long-term, because we know we will need to continue those supports throughout the school year, after school programs, things next summer and the following year perhaps, but our intent is to really service the needs of individual students and make sure that we do our very best to fill in the lost learning and make sure that they're successful academically and social and emotionally. Those supports are also being talked a lot about.
Great. I think that's really good to hear. I think it's also important, and you probably are already thinking about this, is that some kids have not fallen behind. Some kids have done well in this setting. So it's really important that we're also accelerating their learning, right? We're offering them advanced opportunities to engage in that more rigorous curriculum, and not slowing them down in the process. And so I always like to plug that in so we don't lose those kids who are really ready for the next step in the advanced setting. And making sure that we're offering those opportunities equitably to them as well.
We thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for the presentation, and thank you, Secretary, for being on hand to answer some of those questions about district plans and subgroup monitoring. I hope that answered your question, Maria, but we can certainly continue that conversation offline too if we want to take that further. Any other questions? And if not, thank you, Marissa. Thank you, Kayla. Really appreciate it. Look forward to getting the briefs that we can share with members by email so folks can dig in further.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure. And with that, I think we'll see if we have anyone. I don't know that we had any signups in advance for public comment or anyone on hand who wishes to offer one. I know we do have some members of the public here, so I'll just give it a moment to see if anyone wishes to raise their hand or mention in the chat that they would like to offer a comment. And if not, I think we will entertain a motion. Don't say we have one more slide with information for you all. I don't see any public commenters. Okay, so next meeting is in June. This day may alter. My prediction is that that's going to conflict with session for several of us on the consortium. So it may be a different specific day, but it'll be at the end of June. And as always, you can contact Haley with questions and to revisit any of the resources that we talked about. Check out all of these nice pages that we have going on, collecting all of our work. So Thank you all, especially thank you all who are working diligently on our work groups. And I know we'll continue to, the next couple of months are going to be really critical in our conversations around, actually bringing our interim recommendations to fruition. So thanks in advance for your role in that. And hopefully we will have some positive news and updates on that in June. So thanks again for taking the time as always. And I don't know that we need a formal motion to adjourn, but if someone would like to make a motion to adjourn, we can go ahead and do that and then call it a night.
Motion.
All right. Thank you, Aaron.
Second.
All right. I think we're good. All right. Thank you, everyone. Talk soon.
Bye.
Good night.
Bye.